So, Danilo, if you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Valtellina, how this geology was formed here, and how you go about viticulture in this really stunning region, that would be fantastic. Danilo, you are currently muted.
Ok, sorry. Buongiorno a tutti.
Ciao.
Buongiorno. Ciao a tutti. Valtellina is a very special place. Like you can see from this beautiful view, we are located in the middle of the Alps. We are more close to Switzerland than in Italy, I can say, because Switzerland is just in front of you in the upper part of the video, on the left side in this moment. And okay, perfect in this way. And like you can see, Valtellina is located really in the middle of the Alps, and we have a sort of crown, natural crown, made of big mountains. In the direction of the Switzerland, we have mountains around 4,000 meters, and in the direction of Italy, mountains of 3,000 meters. The Valtellina is a very unique valley. It is a very unique alpine valley because it is oriented from east to west. If you open a little the view, you can see like in the west side there is the Lake of Como. Okay. The Lake of Como for us is very important because thanks to the natural wind that blow from the lake, we can have enough dry wind that can help in the drying of the grape. But we will talk about the drying later. So you can see very unique is the Valtellina because it is oriented from west. That is the Lake of Como, and the east that is where you can find the Trentino Alto Adige. Thanks to this very special orienting, we have all the north side, so in the direction of Switzerland, totally oriented to the south. There is a geological reason why Valtellina has this kind of character. You have to imagine 200 million years ago, the African platform started to crash against the European platform. The Valtellina is the place where the two platforms crashed. And it is because of this crashing that now we have this kind of special orienting of the valley. To give you an idea, because of the crashing, the Alps went out from the sea. So you can imagine what kind of big crashing there was at that time, and this is one of the reasons why now we have a soil that is very, very complex. Because of the crashing, we can say that the two platforms, the rocks of the two platforms, crashed and mixed together a lot. Because of this reason, now we have a soil made of rocks, obviously, that is very, very different from one piece of land to the other. And this is one of the reasons why in Valtellina it is possible with the same grape that is Nebbiolo, because we only have Nebbiolo in Valtellina. Also, if we have only one kind of grape, it is possible in Valtellina to try many different kind of taste of Nebbiolo, depending by the terroir. So the rocks, that is the difference of the rocks is the main reason why we have these different in the taste of the wine, but not only.
So Danilo, I had the opportunity to visit you last year in Valtellina and was just utterly stunned by the mountains, the angle of the slopes. And one thing that was fascinating, and I know you get asked this question all the time, but what was fascinating was not only the terraces and how they're built, but how you and many vintners in this region get the grapes from the terraces to your winery. If you could just mention that briefly, that would be great.
Yes, obviously, we are in the mountain. In the mountain, everything is difficult. It is our area is very steep, very steep, and thanks to the terraces made with the walls are made only with stones, and it is really very difficult to manage our area. To give you an idea, we need more than 1,500 hours per hectare of manual work. Everything must be done by hands, and we have to bring down from the vineyard the grapes down in the cellar, most of the time with boxes on the shoulders. In some place is not possible to walk, and so we prefer to use the helicopter to bring down the grapes. Give to you an idea of how is difficult to work in our region.
So that was helicopter that he said there, ladies and gentlemen. The grapes are picked, put into a pick box, and then a helicopter comes with the tow line, attaches to the box, and off it goes to the winery. It's pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, but with the helicopter is easy. Is by wood that is more difficult to bring down the grapes. But anyway, we make Nebbiolo in this valley from more than 2,000 years. The Romans started to grow grapes here, and so we have a little habit to work in difficult conditions.
So Danilo, if you, the other thing that I learned when I was in Valtellina last year is that Danilo actually hails from the Langhe. And so he has the expertise and the experience in knowing how Nebbiolo performs in the Langhe versus how it does in Valtellina. And if you could just briefly touch on that, I think that was really fascinating when I was there.
Yes, there is a big difference. The grape is the same. So Nebbiolo in the Langhe and Nebbiolo of Valtellina is the same. But totally different is especially the soil, because in the Langhe, the soil is a soil made of clay. At the opposite, here in Valtellina, the soil is completely made of rocks and of stones. And then very different is the weather, the weather condition, because The Langhe is located very close to the Mediterranean Sea, the Ligurian Sea, and Valtellina is located in the middle of the Alps. I give you, probably you know, but what is unique of Valtellina is the quantity of sunny days. Thanks of the crowns of the mountains, and thanks to the special location in the middle of the Alps, we have a huge quantity of beautiful sunny days during the year. To give you an idea, in the summer we have the same quantity of sun that there is in Pantelleria. Pantelleria is located in the south of Sicily. And this is one of the reasons why Nebbiolo, that is a very difficult grape to grow, can have a very good maturation also in a difficult place in the middle of the Alps. So the sun, the beautiful day, and the exposition that permit to the Nebbiolo to catch a lot of energy by the sun.
That's awesome. It really is important to the region. Otherwise, you would not be able to get Nebbiolo ripe here. You also don't have fog. Correct me if I'm wrong, Danilo, but I believe that fog is less of a factor here as compared to Barolo, Barbaresco, other places further south.
Yes, no fog. Fortunately, here we have no fog because one of our most important wine is the Sforzato, and Sforzato is made drying the grapes. We do the drying only in the natural way. So we put the grapes picked in little boxes under the roof of the house that we have inside of the vineyard. And the drying happen only because of the natural wind that blow in the early morning from the top of the mountain to from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the valley, and in the afternoon from the Lake of Como until the top of the mountain. So this natural blowing permit to dry the grapes, and not to have fog is the best for us because the grape can stay in perfect condition.
That's great. And so in the breakout groups, everybody will have an opportunity to taste Sforzat. If you haven't had one before, this one is top notch. And it's one of those things where we've all studied it at some point in preparation for an exam, but you can't really wrap your head around it until you taste it. So looking forward to the breakout group and tasting that with you, Danilo. Let us now, Greg, if you'd share your screen and drive us over to Trento and take us to the amazing sparkling house of Ferrari.
Well,
and
thank you.
We'll hear from Marcello.
Thank you, James. Thank you to everybody. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. I am Marcello Lunelli, and I represent the third generation of our family in the Ferrari and in the Gruppo Lunelli. I run with my cousin Matteo, Camilla, and Alessandro the company. Giulio Ferrari founded the company in 1902, so we have a huge years of history. And he brought for the first time in Italy the variety of Chardonnay. So we have more of the 95% of our grapes is a Chardonnay, and the rest is Pinot Noir. At the beginning, Giulio Ferrari produced a very high quality sparkling wine. He won international competition like in Milan or in Paris. And in 1952, he decided to sell the winery, and our grandfather decided to buy this very small winery. At that time, Mr. Giulio Ferrari produced less than 10,000 bottles. Now we produce around 10,000 bottles in 1 hour. So in the last 60 years, the technology ran very, very fast, but we don't change anything about the history and the fundamentals of our company. So we produce only mountain bottle fermented sparkling wine. So Ferrari is like champagne with the Metodo Classico, with the Méthode Champenoise. We use Chardonnay. We produce only in Trentino, so all the bottle are produced under the Trento DOC. So that it means we produce only grapes from Trento province. And we follow everything from the farm to the fork. It's a joke, but we grow the grapes and we sell the bottle, and we check and we have under control every single steps of the process and of the quality. Sorry. So Chardonnay and Pinot Noir from Trentino. We are located in the northeast of Italy, 1 hour far from Verona, in the middle of Dolomites. Dolomites is a UNESCO heritage since I think 2015. The soil are quite simple because they comes from very old glaciers. So the soil are sandy or sometimes mainly stones. With the limestone is around 8%. It's not so high like in Champagne, but it's quite enough to have the salty, the sapidity, and the special taste of our Trento DOC. We produce only from high altitude of the hills around Trento and the lateral valley of the Adige Valley. So from 300 meters high to 800-900 meters high. So it's very important to maintain the acidity. So the typical climate of our region is a continental climate. That means during July and August to have very hot temperature during the day, but during the night the temperatures goes down from 30 degrees Celsius to 15, 16 degrees. So we can maintain a high level of acidity. So during the harvest we can arrive with a quite good level of sugar. So 11.5 alcohol degrees natural, but with a high level of acidity. As you know, Champagne, Trentino, and some other good place in the world to produce bottle fermented sparkling wine, we need acidity to maintain the longevity and the special drinkability of this wine. So in the 1952 we bought the company, and so from Giulio Ferrari the ownership passed to my grandfather Bruno, then to my father and our uncles, and now we arrive at the third generation. Ferrari sell around 5.5 million bottles. So we are the first producer of sparkling wine in Italy, and overseas the percent of the export market is around 20%. So we want to increase in the future this part of the company.
So Marcello, can you tell us a little bit about how you work in the vineyards with Chardonnay that might be different from other famous regions that feature Chardonnay, like Franciacorta or Champagne?
Yes. Well, I don't know if we run different. So we have a very typical trolling system called Pergola Semplice Trentina. So is special from this part of Italy, of this northeast of Italy. we run the vineyards since 2009 with a biological protocol. So we don't use any more pesticides and chemical spray. We use only copper and sulfur and natural fertilization like green manure or organic stuff.
That has to be challenging in this climate, no?
Yes, it's quite a challenge because of the rain is around 1,000 millimeter each year. So it's very, very important to have a well-balanced the production in the vineyard. So we have around between 8 and 9 tons per hectare. So 1 hectare is 3 acres. So it's not a huge production of grapes, but it's important to have a very safe and healthy bunches during the harvest.
Marcello, we have a question here from Ashley.
Yeah.
What were your harvest dates this year for Chardonnay and Pinot?
Yeah, for the Chardonnay this year, we started on 17th of August and we finish on 24th of September. It has been the longest harvest in our history. And in the last 10 years, we saw that the harvest begin around 10 to 15 days in advance. So because there is the global warming. So in this part of Italy, we will have a problem if we didn't have our vineyards on the hills, because the harvest starts in advance and the warm climate destroyed the acidity. So the work for our generation, it will be to move all the vineyards 100, 150 meters higher than now to maintain the same condition that we have. Unfortunately, other part of region that produce sparkling wine, they cannot have the lucky to have the Dolomites. So we moving the vineyards. In the other part of Italy, they have to work how to manage the vineyards. So probably they have to use a special natural stuff to reduce the temperature of the grapes and the vines. They cannot destroy the leaves close to the bunches because they needed to have the darkness of the leaves to reduce the temperature during July and August. Because Franciacorta start the harvest 2 weeks in advance, like in Trento. But they cannot in the future start in the middle of July because they need, like we, around 10 days between the flowering to the harvest. So we joking between 90 and 100 days from flowering to harvest. So if we reduce too much these numbers of days, we reduce the quality of our grapes.
And I know that everyone's got some specific questions for Marcello about the wine, which we'll discover in the breakout groups when we're tasting the delicious Perle. If you haven't had the Ferrari wines, these are some of the best sparkling wines in the world, not just in Italy, on all over the world. And the setting is absolutely stunning. You really do feel like you're in The Sound of Music. It's insane, really gorgeous. Thank you, Marcello, for that. Appreciate it. Greg, if you could drive us right just north up to Alto Adige and Kettmeyer, and we'll hear from Alberto.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, James. And welcome to Alto Adige, or South Tyrol, Südtirol, as we call here, because we use a German word like South Tyrol or Südtirol, because we are very close to Austria, and until 100 years ago, 101 years ago, this area, like Trentino, was in the empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, and differently from Trentino, this area remained very strict to the German tradition. The landscape and the houses are really close. A lot of grape varieties use German or Austrian style grape varieties like Müller-Thurgau, we are in tasting, or like Weissburgunder, Pinot Bianco, on Riesling, Kerner, and other grapes. We are an alpine region like Trento and like Valtellina, but with a different structure of soils. We have a mix of soils due to different geological period to formation, because the first rocks, the oldest rocks are 5 to 700 million age, then arrived 280 million years ago, a big volcano in the area of Bolzano, who created a plateau of porphyric soil, very famous in a Bolzano area. And then we have our Müller-Thurgau vineyards. And then we have dolomite formation 130 million years ago. And then more recently, 700,000 years ago, not millions, but 1,000 years ago, glaciers and the ice age. So we have a mix according to altitude, according to the place of soils. So we start with alluvium soil on the valley floor. Then we have bedrock in terms of a porphyric soil close to Bolzano, Terlano area. Then we can have limestone or bedrock close to the mountains. We have morenic soils close to Lake Galdaro because of the glaciers. And so it's a mix of soils we can find in every places. Different altitude from 200 meters valley floor to over 1,000 meters altitude, some vineyards. Our vineyards, you can see on behind me, is our vineyards of Müller-Thurgau, 800 meters, 765 to 820. It's around 2,500, 2,700 feet altitude. And these different altitude, exposure, shadow areas, kind of soils make the possibility in Alto Adige to have around 25 different grape varieties, because every grape variety finds its best in a different position. About Müller-Thurgau, here the position of our Maso, yes, exactly, Soprabolzano, is very high altitude. We are around, as I told you, 2,500 feet altitude. South exposure, so we have very warm days. This area, like Danilo said, in Valtellina, is very similar in terms of sunlight days, because we can reach around 300 days a year of sunlight. That is very important for chlorophyll and photosynthesis, and for the formation of aromatics, sugar, aromatics, and acidity. But the high altitude keep the possibility to keep the acidity and freshness during nights, so we can have a very good temperature shift day and night. And this is accentuated by the particular kind of soil, because in this area is a mainly, not only, but mainly porphyric soil. Porphyric soil is a hard rock, but when it breaks during centuries, it becomes really sandy. So the texture, the structure, the texture is sandy soil. The structure is very loose, so very good drainage, and the temperature range difference of day and night we have outside. Okay, we can have even in the lands, because it warms and cool even the lands, because a lot of airs in it, but we don't know how roots react to this temperature range. It's a very nice area. Temperature range, porphyric soils. The grape variety is Müller-Thurgau. Is not famous, not considered not so qualitative, especially in German, but is a grape variety that needs high altitude. and very wide temperature range in order to preserve the acidity. It comes from a cross between Riesling and Madeleine Royale, but unfortunately, it wasn't able to keep all the acidity we have in Riesling. So we have to create it by using high altitude area like this, and so preserve freshness because of the slowing of the respiration of the berries during night, because in September, we can reach even 5 degrees. So it's a very, very nice place for this kind of a variety.
Alberto, I noticed, I was watching the screen as you were talking, and Greg pulled up some kind of geolocator tool and drug it over the Soprabolzano vineyard.
Yes.
And it was the slope of the vineyard is something like 20, 29, 30% in some places. So that is extremely steep. Obviously, there's no tractors up here, and you're
not at all.
Harvesting by hand, and whoever's working those vineyards probably has legs like a Tour de France rider. But can you tell us something about Müller-Thurgau, and is it particularly not only good at altitude? So here's the difference here, I guess is what I'm getting at, is that in Valtellina, you have very steep slopes, but you have terraces. Here, are these vineyards terraced?
No, we don't use particularly terraces in this area.
So there's a lot of drainage.
Yes. It's a real, the erosion is a particular problem, especially because it's a consequence, not direct, of global warming, but indirect, because global warming means very strong phenomena in terms of rainfall, in terms of storm. So it's not so simple to keep the vineyards in the right manner, because the erosion risk to take the land downwards. So, for example, in a viticulture, we use different rootstocks in the higher part compared with the lowest part, because in the higher part there is loose terrain and more humidity than the lowest part. There are only 50 meters altitude of difference, but it's completely different, okay, say drainage. And so one possibility in terms of quality is to use different rootstock in terms of exalting the characteristic of Müller-Thurgau. For example, we are moving from pergola, that we have the oldest vines, to simple Guyot, that is more more effective in terms of yields, in terms of exposure to the sunlight and the aeration compared with pergola. Because yes, we are going to global warming, but we are going to higher and higher rainfall phenomenon. Very, I can say, very short in time. In very few minutes, we can have a lot of rain. So the use of different kind of training system, of trellising, of rootstocks can help us to exalt the Müller-Thurgau characters.
That is really fascinating. I'm looking forward to tasting your Müller and learning more about how it reacts to that soil in exposition. I just would give everybody a second to think about what 30% grade looks like. You would never find it on most roads would never be that steep. And then trying to harvest pergola, like reaching up into the pergola on that kind of slope must be madness. So it makes sense that you're going to Guyot. Thank you for that. And again, looking forward to tasting the wine. And now we're going to drive over to Valdobbiadene and hear from Gianluca, from Bissol. And Gianluca, I'm looking forward to hearing not only about Bissol, but about Cartizze. And if you could talk about Cartizze in relation to a very special place, obviously within the region, and how it's different or maybe the same in some respects to the rest of the region. Gianluca, you are muted at the moment.
Okay, did you hear me?
Yes, there you are. Hello.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So thank you very much for this opportunity to speak about the tradition of my family and the tradition of this part of Italy. We are located in the middle from the Dolomites, from Cortina d'Ampezzo, and Venice, the Sea of Venice. So we are around 60 kilometers, 440 miles from Venice and 40 miles from Cortina, that is considered the pearl of the Dolomite. So we are in a wonderful condition in the hills of Valdobbiadene, hills that allow us to emphasize, to amplify the characteristic of the Glera grape. You know that Glera is a semi-aromatic kind of grape, and for this kind of grape is wonderful to be in this place, because here we have an incredible excursion of temperature. You have to think that during July, during August, so 2 months before the harvest, from the night and the day, we have a different temperature that arrive at more than 25 degrees Celsius degree. So an incredible excursion of temperature that create a lot of flavor in the grape. So there is a very big difference from the Prosecco produced in the hills of Valdobbiadene and Conegliano and Asolo. That is all produced in the hills, not in the flat area. And the Prosecco DOC that is produced in the flat area of Veneto and Friuli. So a very different condition of soil, very different condition of excursion of temperature and altitude and wind, everything changed. So my family is a family of wine growers since 1542, and I'm the 23rd generation. So a long tradition, and generation by generation, my family buy piece of land in the highest and steepest position in the hills of Valdobbiadene and Conegliano. And so now we own 20 plots in an area in which is very difficult to have vineyard, to buy vineyard, because the ownership of this vineyard are divided in 6,000 families. So an incredible small proportion per family, and we are one of the very few wineries that own the vineyard in these hills. So if you think that 95% of the winery buy the wine for produce Prosecco and transform in sparkling wine, only 5% of the wineries are like us, vine growers in Valdobbiadene, in this incredible steep vineyard. We need a lot of work in our vineyard, because we can't go inside the vineyard with the machine, with the tractor. We have to do everything by hand, so we need more than 1,000 hours per hectare of hand work. And if you think that Prosecco produced in the flat area of Veneto and Friuli, you can use all the machine, you need a maximum for the flat area of Prosecco DOC 60 to 70 hours per hectare. So we need 15 times the work per hectare, but at the end we have this incredible opportunity to emphasize, to amplify the flavors, thanks to this particular kind of soil and particular exposition and excursion of temperature. So my family is the only one family that, thanks to my grandfather Geo, decided to produce 5 different kinds of Prosecco Superiore. Remember the word Superiore, because it's important to remember that if you want to drink a Prosecco that comes from the original area, from the hill of Valdobbiadene and Conegliano and Asolo, you have to ask Prosecco Superiore. If there is not the word Superiore, means that Prosecco is produced in the flat area of Veneto and Friuli. So please remember this, because only 1 bottle every 6 bottles produced in Italy of Prosecco come from the original area of Valdobbiadene, Conegliano and Asolo. And every 600 bottles of Prosecco produced in Italy, only 1 come from the hill of Cartizze. As you tell me before, James, Cartizze is an incredible position for the vineyard of Prosecco, because thanks to this position, the Cartizze hill is like a wall, and every single meter of this hill, very steep, is with the vines. So the viticulture is an incredible position of steepness. And in Cartizze, we have a special kind of soil. We have the sand soil, sand that comes from the marine period. And inside this soil, under 1 meter, we have big rocks, yellow rocks that come from the sea. So it's thanks to this kind of soil and this kind of steepness and this kind of excursion of temperature that the same grape of Prosecco Superiore that we grown in Valdobbiadene and Conegliano, in Cartizze arrive at an incredible step of maturation without losing acidity. This is the little miracle that happened in the hill of Cartizze, because we can leave the grape around 10 to 15 days more without losing acidity. And you know how important it is for an aromatic or semi-aromatic grape to leave for a longer maturation the grape without losing acidity. So thanks to this,
it truly is. It's absolutely stunning. And, you know, pictures don't do it justice. You really do have to go there and stand in the vineyard and hope that you don't fall off, because it is that steep. And I, you know, studied Cartizze before I knew about it, but until I went there and actually stood in the vineyard, I didn't have the sense of profoundness that this crew really holds. Gianluca, can you talk a little bit about the typical style of Cartizze, which I believe requires a relatively high level of sugar?
Yes, the Cartizze is traditionally the last grape to be harvested. So in the past, when there wasn't the controlled temperature, there wasn't the steel tanks, everything was by the nature. Cartizze was harvested around at the middle of November, later than now. And so when started the fermentation in the small wineries, because you have to remember that only 30 years ago, Prosecco was a very regional kind of wine, not exported, not sold in all Italy, not at all in export. So there was only very small wineries in the small houses, and in every houses there was a small tank in which the fermentation was controlled only by the temperature of the ambience, not the controlled temperature. So Cartizze was the last grape to be harvested. At the end, he can't finish the fermentation before the winter. So during all the winter, we have this incredible sweet and rich of flavor wine. And so the tradition of Cartizze is to be sweet, but this sweetness is perfect balanced with the acidity. So at the end, you can drink Prosecco like an aperitif without problem, because it's 25 grams of sugar residual, but thanks to the acidity, it's cleaned perfectly the mouth, and you can eat everything. It's incredible match for the Japanese cuisine for me in general, for the Asian cuisine. In New York, my Cartizze is in the famous Japanese restaurant Mesa. So he loved the match of the Cartizze with his food. And so
I couldn't agree more. It's the power of Cartizze, right? It's got a natural richness, not only in sugar, but also in acidity and just structure in general. And you really don't feel the sugar so much when you're tasting the wine. It really is stunning, gorgeous wine. Not you know, you treat it as an aperitif, but to your point, Gianluca, it is very versatile at the table as well.
Yes, exactly. So in the chat, I see that someone asked me which are the level of sugar residual that we can use for the rules. We can. There is no rules for the residual sugar, so we can also have a zero sugar residual. But for the tradition, the wineries, the major part of the wineries produce Cartizze with a sugar residual of around from 20 to 30, 35. But it's very interesting, the question, because if you produce a Cartizze with the zero sugar residual, you can obtain an incredible different kind of flavor, because the sugar, you know, is have a lot of influence in the explosion of the aromatic flavor. So
I for one, very much look forward to tasting the João in the breakout group, and then talking a bit more about how sugar, specifically to Cartizze, how sugar can affect the end wine and the general balance of the wine. So thank you, Gianluca. Just for the sake of time, again, all of you, I just want to spend an hour talking with, but I want to make sure that Daniela gets a chance to talk about Terradora and Campania and Irpinia and Fiano. So Greg, if you would drive us down to the lower Apennines, that would be fantastic.
First of all, thank you for this incredible opportunity to introduce, I can say, the special legend of Campania's wine. I'm Daniela Mastroberardino, and I was born into a family that began the winemaking venture at the end of the 18th century. Even if Terradora di Paolo is a relative young winery, because it was founded in the 1978, and the first vintage was 1994, when between the two Mastroberardino brothers there was the split, and my father decided to take the family vineyards and to start with a new winery, and he decided for the brand Terradora di Paolo because immediately we can say what is the philosophy of the winery, the value of the land, of the vineyards, and the name of my mother, because Dora di Paolo, because Terradora di Paolo at the end is a family estate. This in a very short way the story of the winery, but I think that it's really incredible the location where we are. Generally, when you talk about of Campania, Campania is a region of southern Italy. It's very difficult to imagine where we are, because generally southern Italy there is the classical view of the sea, of the sun, flat areas, rather than Irpinia is a completely far away this classical view, and this is the reason that Campania is very different in each counties that are in particular 5. In Irpinia, the Apennine cross the Campania and split the Campania region in 2 different sides. This is really important to understand why we are like an isle of Nordic climate in the middle of the south, because it's clearly on the west sides you can find the beautiful coastline. I don't mention, but Campania is the region where is Capri, Positano, Amalfi, Pompeii, probably some of the most beautiful Italian touristic destination. Rather than on the east sides, you find mountains, you find hills, waterways. I can say that in Irpinia there is a green ocean, not the blue ocean of the coastline, but the green ocean of the woods, of the vineyards. And also the climate is very far away from the typical Mediterranean climate of the coast. We are in an area where we have a continental climate, cold cold winter with the fall of snow. But in particular, what is really interesting is that during the summertime, we have hot days, but very chilly night. Here we have generally an average during the summer of 30-35 Celsius degree during the day, and the night around 20. So you can understand that the difference of 15 Celsius degree, that is like to say, I think 45 Fahrenheit, is an incredible difference that explains why this area is considered a very continental climate area. Also because I mentioned before, it is a mountainous area with a great elevation. Definitely, Irpinia is not probably the most famous in terms of heroic viticultural area, because obviously on the coast there are the terraces on the ocean. Rather than in Irpinia, we have slopes that start generally from 300 meters on sea level, also to overcome for vineyards 700 meters on sea level. We have also a village around 1000 meters that probably is not really common in the southern Italy, and you can understand how really this part of Campania is completely far away. The postcard that we have, Campania, the Mount of Vesuvius, famous for the explosion, for the Herculean explosion 2 millennia ago, the city of Naples, and the beauty of the coast. This is another Campania. I like to introduce like another Campania, and is the reason of how in this part of Campania we can produce, in my opinion, great white wine, because we have this special combination of elevation and climate. I don't mention probably the most famous things about Campania's wine, the soil, because definitely in Irpinia we have mainly calcareous clay soil, but it's clearly that we have also volcanic soil, also plastic materials. It's a characteristic of the soil. Probably you don't know, because I don't mention that the winery is located in Montefusco. Montefusco is 2 hours far away from Rome, and 1 hour far away by drive from Naples. It's difficult to imagine that there is an explosion of Mount Vesuvius that was called Pomici Avellinesi. Avellino is the main city of Irpinia area, and is around 40 minutes far away from Naples. And there is an ancient explosion that take the name by the city of Avellino, because Pomici is a light stone, and you can imagine that because Mount Vesuvius is an explosive volcanoes, the characteristic of the explosion eruption is material go up a lot, and when landed arrive very far away from the center of the explosion. So I can say that it's difficult to imagine how this corner desert of Campania region is really interesting for viticulture. Another important characteristic that people do not imagine about Irpinia's wine is the harvest time. Tonight in the winery we are working because it's harvest. We started the harvest time this year, 29 of September, and for us it's not a traditional start of harvest time, because generally we started at the beginning of October, and we finish with the famous Aglianico in November, in the highest part of the area of production of Taurasi, that is with the Fiano, the other important appellation of the area. We end the harvest time in the middle of November. This probably is the right short image, because you can understand how this area is completely far away. The postcard that I mentioned before, that is typical of the south. But I like to mention that in this area it's heroic, the viticulture, also for another reason, because I don't mention it enough, but this region is famous not for international varieties, but for incredible indigenous grape variants. Aglianico, Fiano, Greco, and Falanghina, the most popular, are almost of Greek origin. So you can imagine that arrived in Campania before the Roman time. And I can say, imagine that in the middle of 19th century, in Irpinia, we have 50,000 hectares of vineyards that reach in the 1920s 2,000 hectares. That is a big extension of vineyard that today it's not complete, it's not the number, because David culture in Irpinia is not so so characterized by this big number. And in few decades, due to the flux at the Second World War, in the middle of 50 years, the vineyards in Irpinia became 50 hectares. For this reason, you can understand when the Mastroberardino brothers come back to the agriculture, why there was the renaissance of Irpinia viticulture, because in the middle of 50, we can say that this great ocean of vineyards of the middle of 90s was disappeared. It was a very fast decline, but in 20 years start everything again. And I can say this is heroic in a different way, but is I can say different. The reason why all of different producers tonight are a great expression of Italian countryside, because the passion with the heart is probably the reason that we can do this job also in not easy place.
I love it. That was a really great wrap up to the country of Italy and how heroic viticulture works. I really thank you, Daniela, for mentioning the indigenous varieties and how they have shrunk over time, but now are being supported once again. I think they are extremely important to the identity of these places and the culture in general of Italy. And wow, how cool is it to see how the Apennines affect temperature from daytime to nighttime in this region. You know, when we think of the south of Italy, generally we think of it being quite hot, and it can be, of course, but to have that influence from the mountains is super important.